Hello and welcome to the Data Collection and Ownership webinar from Telium. My name is Alexandre and I'm the Deployment Director for EMEA. My team's role is to work with new and existing customers of Telium and to support in both initial deployment of our software, but also work to help customers get more value over the life of a partnership. This particular topic is very close to me personally. I've worked with a number of customers, first as part of a digital agency and then within a corporate focusing on data and digital analytics. Finally today in my current role, I've seen over the last maybe 15, 16 years how digital data has matured, and yet some of the challenges are as difficult today as they ever were from way back when. My hope is that through this webinar that I can empower you, maybe give you a bit more sort of ideas and thoughts around both the sort of the clarity of the common challenges and also considerations and next steps that you might want to move forward with. So with these points in mind, I'd like to break the discussion down really into four broad topics of why is data quality important, looking at some of the more common challenges that a lot of our customers face and some sort of anecdotal, I guess, stuff from things I've experienced over the years. Looking at the data roles, who are available, who can help, what sort of people you should look for sort of data control and data collection, and some best practices. To start us off, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So to me, when I'm talking about the data collection, I'm talking about the scoping, delivering, and reviewing or validating of the actual or metadata about the assets and the visitors to those assets. And for the most part, I'm talking about websites, or more accurately, a web page as an asset, but this extends to, I guess, to screens within a mobile app or a kiosk, as well as an event in the real world, for example. So building entry systems or heart rate reader could also be sort of the data we're talking about. Obviously, from Telium's point of view, we focus on digital data, but we can easily accommodate offline data. One of our sort of internal, more fun uses of the Telium platform is collecting the goals and the scores and the games that we play on the foosball table that we have in our office. So I mentioned visitors earlier. So we said within data collection, the first step on the data journey is often focused on assets and their usage. This by itself, whilst insightful to a degree, becomes infinitely more powerful if you can further collect data on the visitors to those assets. With visitor data aligned with asset data, you can start to look at both a better informed visitor analysis and deeper cohort analysis on asset usage, as well as a better contextualized communication with your users and visitors. If your data now looks to inform your communication with and the deeper analysis of customers, the quality of the data is now obviously a stronger consideration than as a mere vehicle for reporting. Everyone should have heard of the phrase rubbish in, rubbish out. And never was a phrase, I think, more true in regards to digital data. Poor data quality from the beginning may on the surface not provide any issues, but as you get smarter or as you start to democratize the data, harder questions arise. And with these harder questions, greater focus continues to be put on the data. And challenges at this point are not only going to impact on the data project, but this then spills into the tools that make use of that information. I've had many conversations with different users who say kind of my analytics tool is rubbish, or it's not very good, or kind of doesn't do what I need it to do, and all the reports are wrong. This is often actually, when you scratch the surface of this, it's more often it's not the tool. The tool is not a rubbish tool. It can't do what you need it to. More often than not, it's the quality of the data going in, which means they can't produce the results that they're looking for, expecting, because the information is not there in the first place. But why should you care? This sort of doubt or questioning of the data can make or break even the biggest of data-driven projects or tools. Confidence in the data, and I'll mention confidence kind of quite a few times. Confidence in the data, both for yourself but across any data stakeholders, is key. With that confidence comes more questions or more tasks for your data set, which in turn provides more opportunities. And obviously, the inverse is true. If you don't have the data quality, you don't have the questions, you don't have the confidence, and then the purpose of that data or of that tool is then lessened. Also, as people explore and use and monetize the data, the quality again is more important. If you're paying your affiliate marketers based on the conversion data, you want to be sure that information is correct. I would say you'd even want to be more confident that your data is correct than perhaps what those affiliates provide you, so that you can have the confidence to go back with the information. Another example, if you're looking at attribution modeling, so we know some of our customers look at, rather than looking at an affiliate kind of a last click payment, they look at kind of attribution modeling as to how much of that conversion was a result of that last click or that affiliate. But if you're looking at that and looking at either through patterns or through machine learning from an attribution point of view, again, the confidence and the quality of the data needs to be there so that you can provide those kind of that right insight or that right kind of leverage to generate revenue, or as a kind of a catalyst then to initiate the testing to prove out other hypotheses. So if we agree that data quality is important, what's standing in the way of providing the perfect data for all our needs? How do we get to that data collection nirvana? I think the first thing to say is that even for the most dedicated teams out there, no one would say that they are done. No one would say that they have reached that perfect state. There's always another challenge, and that in itself is a challenge. Firms are now much more aware that a website is not a fire and forget marketing channel. They require support and evolution in order to retain their value. Yet now we see firms who still consider data collection as a single item, but they still look to use that data in an ongoing manner. There is no magic answer to this. As we see customers grow in the data space, we see a slow realization that the data collection needs support to provide quality. This seems to come through strong internal voices, or more often, the result of falling foul of some of the issues that have arisen from that poor quality data in the first place. For firms that do have some of these blocks in place, there are other challenges to the collection, to the data collection, such as project evolution. And this is not really tied to one project methodology over another. I think it's more split around I would say kind of two types of evolution, a kind of a site evolution or a data evolution. Site evolution can often lead to more possibilities or more challenges. These can be known, or more often, I think in the context of the data, is they would be unknown. What worked yesterday in your data collection doesn't function today. From working with a range of customers and from my own experience, what I've tended to see is where the way around this is to sort of work within a cross-functional team, or at least have that cross-functional awareness. This doesn't necessarily mean that we move away from the site evolution and the possibilities and challenges that it raises, but it does move the needle into the known category, so that at least you're aware of what's changing, so that you have an opportunity to make the changes needed to continue your data. On the other side, looking at, as I said, the data evolution, I see this as always being one of the biggest challenges to data collection. The questions like, if I knew how you were going to use it when I started, I would have done it differently. Or, well, we don't have that data. I can get it though, but we haven't got it now. This is the, if you like, the crystal ball of data knowledge. There are vendors out there who say they can collect everything, but I think even those would agree that there's going to be additional configuration as the data requirements evolve. So that it's never a perfect, we have all of the information, everything you'll ever need ever. There's always going to be changes and evolution in that. I'd say it's a very skilled data architect who can kind of gauge the current requirements of data and try to anticipate what might be useful data points in the future. I think even those that approach to track everything may end up with kind of data evolution, but maybe they're looking at it as a de-scoping. So some of the everything turns out not to be very useful. So I think that evolution will always happen, and you just, I think, probably need to embrace that. I think the other thing, sort of, as you're evolving, is to not put off the changes, not put off making those changes. I think as the requirements become clearer, I think try and get them scoped into your backlog or into your requirements specs as soon as you can. And small incremental changes means that you can get increased value of data delivery without having to build it into massive projects all the time. And some of this can be supported by tools like tag management, so like our IQ platform. We have a number of clients who may, in the short term, make data amends or collect additional information through our tool rather than wait for getting the correction at source as kind of like a short-term fix. But ultimately, the source is where any correction or addition should be made. One of my personal favorites from a data collection point of view is this last in rather, first out. Data as an element of a digital platform is, on many projects I've worked on over the years, the last thing to be considered. And if timelines are tight or if you're overrunning, it's often the first thing to be descoped. I've always found it slightly fascinating that once a new project goes live, the first thing that management wants to know is how's it looking? What's the data look like? Often it's the simplistic, how many visits have we got? How many page views? But if you've been descoped, that's a fairly short conversation. I've yet to see a foolproof way to completely remove this as an issue. One approach that has worked in some instances is to try and decouple the actual data collection, or rather data availability, and the data collection solutions. Now, obviously, if you're familiar, this is a key principle of tag management. What I mean from that is if you work early in the scoping or early sprints to ensure that the solution provides an agnostic data set within the application itself, then in later phases or sprints you can connect this sort of agnostic data to your chosen solutions. But at least you've ensured you have the data and that you're off the critical path of delivery. So you move yourself away from that last in, first out. The last challenge I wanted to mention is on data ownership. So I've worked again with a number of different organizations who've had analytics teams or data science teams or teams who own customer satisfaction or marketing teams who own data. In short, a large number of teams who kind of own the analysis of data or the usage or purpose of data. But surprisingly small list who have teams who own the data collection. I think this lack of ownership is a tough cycle to break. I think poor data quality or often siloed usage erodes the trust in data. The teams look into their own subset and focus on what they're doing rather than tackle it as a whole. And then that lack of overall ownership then leads to further erosion of quality, which impacts further on trust, etc., and round you go. I don't think there's really a sort of a magic solution for this one either. I think this is more simply someone just sticking their neck out or just sort of putting their hand up to taking the responsibility. The skills needed for this means that realistically it's not a one-person job. So whoever is that person who puts his hand up saying, "Yeah, I'll own this, I'll do this," they're going to need support because it cuts across a broad range of, I would guess, requirements and kind of skills that an individual would need to have. That said, it shouldn't take a cast of thousands. I mean, there are different teams and different skill sets that can play a role in the collection, the ownership and usage of data. But I think it's worthwhile just to go through a couple of those now, just some of some of those different roles and the sort of people you should look for and how they can help you in the different contexts that we've been talking about. At first, you're going to need your business sponsor. I know this is not really a role, but I think this is key to taking ownership and being able to enforce that and to enforce the changes that are needed to get your quality to the point you want. If you've already laid out the sort of, as we've discussed earlier, the why is data quality important, you should be well on that path already. So, okay, what are the roles you should look at? For me, data roles fall into three broad categories. At the top, we've got the data scientists. So these are the rocket scientists, or the rock stars, if you like, of the data world. And they focus very much on the programmatic modeling and statistical analysis. I mean, it's so tricky, you can't even say it. They are more the data user category, and they often have a working assumption that data quality is up there and has been provided. So they're a strong contender from a usage point of view, but from an ownership and from a data quality, they're probably less of a useful audience as a generic group. The next group is the data analyst. So this is a slightly trickier category, as the entry requirements for this role are not very high. So you can find a number of, or rather a range of skills within the role or within the sort of the type of people who would apply for this role. In my opinion, a data analyst should have a balance of two kind of core areas of skills. The first obviously being in the analysis, being able to take a business challenge or goal and have the ability to use the data to support that. The second skill is in questioning and validating the data collection. A good data analyst should not just blindly build you a report. You can get report monkeys 19 to a dozen. I think what you want from a good data analyst is should be able to, with confidence, be able to tell you how and where the data is collected and how reliable it is. In terms of the sort of the ownership and the data collection, kind of this role is useful in identifying or challenge areas and which are more business critical. So this role is a role that can help focus where you need to put effort, because they're the ones that use that data and should be looking into where it's coming from to be able to get sort of good analysis. The last group I think you really want to look at is the data architects or data engineers, I guess. For me, these are almost the flip of the data analysts. So they should have an understanding of how users might want to analyze the data, but the focus for someone in this role should be more on the structure and the process behind the production of the data itself. Users in this group often will come from more of an IT background. I mean, some may have migrated from a data analyst role as their skills in the data collection increase. But this is the sort of core for data quality, data collection, data governance. This is the role, or this is the sort of category of people you should be looking for. Certainly in my role within a deployment team, when I'm looking for engineers or people to work with our clients, this is the role that I look for predominantly when I'm hiring. So moving on from different roles, we've talked about obviously why we want good data. We've talked about the challenges, and as I said, we've talked about the different roles that could help. To close out on the kind of the next piece, if you like, I'd just like to suggest hopefully some useful ideas or best practices that you should consider as you move forward with your own data collection and ownership challenges. First and foremost, nothing beats a clear goal and plan and a plan for how to achieve it. There are any number of acronyms that reiterate this, but I think nothing can take away from the fact that knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and most importantly, being able to articulate this to other teams or managers shows a preparedness and an understanding. In all organizations, but certainly in some of the larger ones I've worked with, being able to explain to a non-technical, maybe management area, audience, what you want, what time you need, resources or money that are required, and what you will do with it, and maybe, and again, probably even more importantly, what you will be able to provide back to the business is very important, and the planning is absolutely key to that. As part of your planning, you need to think beyond the collection and current usage, and think about what access controls you have around your data. Who has access to it? How do they get access to it? What can be shared? What is sensitive? Certainly in large organizations, creating an easy way to onboard new users, and just as importantly, how to exit company leavers is a key consideration. I'd also maybe suggest planning for success. By that I mean, if there's only a handful of you today who use the data, a new starter can swing his chair around, tap me on the shoulder, ask for access. Easy. If your project goes well and more people from other departments want access, how do they know they need to come to you? Do you want loads of emails asking for access, making you into that gatekeeper, that sort of admin role? Or would a system or a wiki or some other information repository be more effective in providing information for what people can get access to, what they need to do in order to get access to it? And maybe even, again, as you say, for larger projects or for larger systems, is there a way to automate the onboarding? Or is there a support team available that would be able to do that for you? Another one to think on is about get in early. I don't mean be the first in the office. I mean make sure you get awareness of new projects or changes that might impact on your ongoing projects and get involved. You can do this kind of two ways, I guess. It's the old carrot and stick. So you can do it with a carrot, offer support and time to projects as and when you find out about them, to make sure, again, we're not that sort of first in, last out. Or you can do it with a stick. So you can look at having a business mandate that projects cannot go live until data have signed it off. So until data collection and ownership have had agreement that everything's in place. I have seen this approach in action, and you certainly get some of those first in, last out instances 1 or 2 days from launch when they're coming begging for you or cussing and swearing because they didn't know or they weren't aware, or why do you have to sign it off? That obviously over time does drop, and then you end up finding you've gone the other way, where actually now people lean towards you and try and get you involved earlier so that you don't have that sort of last minute scramble. So there's certainly an element of short-term pain, but absolutely it provides you with a long-term gain. But again, to reiterate back to where we mentioned earlier on roles and that business stakeholder, you need that business stakeholder from an earlier stance, so that when you take that data ownership role, if you do instigate a stick approach rather than carrot, that you have the backing and you have that sign off from a suitable level of seniority that you can actually enforce it. So the last suggestion for today is to never deploy 100%. So this is probably, I would say, probably more for people or for teams who are still working in the waterfall methodology. For teams where management want 100% sign off before they release anything. I mean, I challenge you to reach for 100%. I challenge you to reach for 100%, obviously, but maybe look to agree an acceptable threshold. You may need to be a little bit sneaky, given that the sort of the last in, first out I talked on earlier often means that data collection and analysis is defined as a sort of an MVP before you even get started. So you need to sort of maybe over-define your MVP to allow for kind of that risk of de-scoping. If all else fails, a sort of the old 80-20 rule is a good yardstick to start from in terms of what you need to do before you can push stuff out. So those are kind of some of the things I was thinking about, some of the suggestions. Thanks for sort of listening in. Conscious is kind of not a hugely long session, but I'm hoping there's a lot in here that's kind of ideas or thoughts for you to take away. If I was just going to sum up, I guess, the last sort of half hour of what we've talked on into 5 points, I would say we're looking at good data is important. So putting the time in to get you this I think will save you X-fold time and money further down the road trying to retrofit or improve data. Make sure you have an understanding of ownership from the beginning. I think is really important. And I've skipped number 2, sorry. Embrace the change and challenge. Things change. Accept this, but then manage it on your own terms. And I guess to do that, to accept that change, is plan. Understand what you're trying to do, and what the business goals are, and how your data collection efforts are going to fit into that. And I think key to all of this, and it runs through kind of all of what we've talked on so far, is communication. Communication across the business is absolutely key. When people talk about data silos, it's not just the information that's siloed, but it's often the people who look at that information is too. So again, communication is really important in that. And to steal a phrase from the poet John Donne, is no data team is an island. So that's all I really have for today. I hope that was useful. As I said, it's only sort of half hour time. So I've got time for a couple of quick questions. So if anyone's got anything they wanted to ask, by all means, put them in the comments and we'll see what we can do. A look in here. Okay, there's a couple of quick questions that I think would be interesting. First one I have on here then is what size team do you need to manage your data collection? I think it's fair to say that depends. I don't think there's any real set formula for how big a team it needs to be. There are a number of factors that you might want to consider, such as size of organization. And maybe, I mean, it's more in the context of the data collection than the actual sort of size of the business. Like, do you have multiple data touch points? Do you have kind of lots of websites? Do you have websites in multiple countries? Do you have multiple apps, etc.? I think a speed of change is another quite a strong factor to the size of the team you'd need to support. Do you have a large development team or multiple development teams who are constantly evolving the digital offering? Or do you have a quite a well-structured program of change that everyone's clear on and sort of work through in a more linear fashion? I think that would make an impact. And kind of other jobs. So actually, that's quite a good one. This is often a big factor around how successfully you can improve data collection. Is data collection, data ownership, is this someone's or a team's role within the business, or is it the side of a desk job? Certainly, when companies first look at tag management, it's often, or kind of we get kind of two sets of customers who work with Telium. We have those who have identified that data quality isn't there and they're looking for ways to improve that. Tag management is quite a good, strong starting point. But often for those users who haven't had tag management in, they also then haven't had the roles of data ownership and data collection within their business. So it's moving them, building the team as a result of that. But I think having said all that, and I said it depends, I'm trying to think, there's not many organizations that I know of that have teams more than sort of 3 or 4 people who focus on data collection and data ownership. There are a few outliers, absolutely. But in most instances, that would be your core. Some of the organizations that we work with will have many more people who will have access to and be willing to make changes around the data. But certainly from a core team and certainly from the ownership, and I think that's quite an important distinction as well. The data ownership role should be the role that puts those controls and those sort of governance elements in, versus people who have access to. So I think that's what we said earlier around plan for success. So assume it's going to be amazing. You're going to have loads of people who want access to it. They're going to be wanting using your tools. They're wanting to be adding more data in. They're going to be using it more. It's going to be driving the business into the future. Plan for that and make sure you've got controls in place so that it doesn't become unwieldy or unusable or unmaintainable. Any other questions? Yes. So, who do you think should own the data? I assume by this you mean which business team should be the owner. I think again, actually, it does kind of depend. There are a number of different teams who can make a case for ownership, but I think it will obviously come down to the type of business you are and how your business runs as to which is the better candidate. Kind of a couple that stand out for me are obviously marketing tends to be the first one that comes to mind. They often have a large number of the customer touch points, and they often kind of are the owners of personalization and analytics tools. As sometimes can be the downside from the marketing side, if they don't have the technical depth to really support the data collection. A flip of that is then we know some organizations where perhaps the data science team might then take kind of the ownership role. And as a team, they will have more of the technical skills, but as I said earlier, they're more of the data users. So if they've got it in that space, maybe it's a step a couple down from what you're paying that as a team to do. Unless obviously you expand that team to have those other roles, so the data analyst and data architect roles. I do know a number of organizations where they've put this more towards IT. And in theory, that's a good idea because they absolutely have the skills. They'll often know the program and be working on the other digital projects. So then this just becomes an element within what they're doing. In practice, when the data collection is given to IT, I've seen a few projects where it really is a side of the desk job, and it's not really what they're there to do. So you might have the technical skills to do it, but you have a disinterested kind of user base who just, oh yeah, we need to put some data in. And that means either the quality is not there, or the analysis and verification isn't followed through to the degree that you'd want as a data user, or you end up with different IT teams or different IT individuals delivering it in a slightly different way. So they're providing the data, but it's not with the consideration for its audience. But again, as I said, in all three cases, I think it would be a step away from the core functionality. So I think to make it work, you could almost argue that it doesn't really matter which team becomes the owner of the data. I think it's whichever team does take on that role, they need to make sure that they have users who are focused on the data ownership and collection. So yeah, I hope that helps. I see there are a couple more questions, but I think rather than just do a long old Q&A, I'll take some of those questions away and provide a sort of an answers back to those individuals after the sessions. If anyone is after more information or interested in how Telium can help in data collection and ownership, please do feel free to get in contact with us. The details are on the screen. And I guess we'll just close say thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.